Rose never expected that this ordinary day would change her life forever. What she thought would be a simple trip to Antiques Roadshow with nothing more than a family heirloom in tow quickly transformed into a moment of discovery, wonder, and trepidation. She had been toying with the idea of bringing her grandmother's painting for a long time, but only recently had the thought crossed her mind that it might be something more, something valuable. Today, standing before Meredith Hilferty, the renowned art appraiser, Rose could feel the weight of her family's legacy bearing down on her. The Pennsylvania Farm Show Complex Expo Center was massive, filled with people in every direction. The event itself was a spectacle and exciting fusion of history, culture, and anticipation. Attendees with various objects, some dusty, others gleaming with pristine condition, buzzed with excitement. Some had simply hoped for a casual appraisal, while others were clearly hoping to discover a fortune hiding in plain sight. Rose wasn't entirely sure where she fit in this mix. She wasn't looking to sell the painting, not at first anyway. To her, it was far more than a mere object. It was a piece of family history, a memory of her late grandmother, and a tangible link to a past that was quickly slipping away. The painting had hung above her grandmother's bed for as long as Rose could remember. It was the first thing she'd see upon entering the room, the light playing off the soft, muted colors of the canvas. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories. Her grandmother had always spoken about the painting with a kind of reverence, though never quite explaining where it came from or why she cherished it so deeply. This piece is a treasure, her grandmother would say, but Rose had never quite understood why. It wasn't an extravagant piece, nothing too flashy, and yet there was something about it, something quietly captivating that had always drawn her in. Rose thought about those evenings after the day's chores were done, sitting at her grandmother's bedside, listening to the soothing stories she would tell. They always began the same way: "I got this piece many, many years ago, and one day you'll know its true value." But despite those assurances, her grandmother had never given her the details. It was as if she wanted the mystery to remain just that, a mystery. And so it stayed with Rose, perched above the bed, casting its calming presence over every family gathering, every holiday, and every moment spent in the house that felt more like a home than anywhere else. Yet, as the years passed, Rose couldn't help but wonder, what was the true story behind it? Why had it been so important to her grandmother? It was a thought that stayed with her as she grew older, and eventually she decided that it was time to seek answers. One quiet afternoon, after her grandmother had passed away, Rose found herself at the family home, doing what she often did, dusting off the heirlooms that had come to define the house. The painting was always the first thing she would clean. As she moved the cloth gently across the canvas, something caught her eye. A small black speck lodged between the glass cover and the canvas. Curious, she leaned in closer and realized that the speck wasn't just dirt, it was a tiny insect, perfectly preserved in time. It was an odd discovery, but it struck her with a strange sense of intrigue. With trembling hands, she carefully removed the frame from the wall, her heart pounding in anticipation. She had always been careful not to disturb the painting, but now she felt compelled to take a closer look. As she carefully peeled away the protective backing, she noticed something she'd never paid attention to before, a signature, faint but undeniably present, at the bottom of the canvas. The name was partially obscured by age and wear, but Rose could make out the words Farney and possibly Henry. Her pulse quickened. Could it be? Could this small, seemingly insignificant painting be the work of Henry Farney, the celebrated 19th century artist known for his depictions of Native American life? She had seen his work in books and museums, and had always admired the depth of his portraits and his evocative landscapes. But if it was truly Farney's work, why hadn't her grandmother ever mentioned it? Could it have been passed down through generations without anyone ever knowing its value? The thought was both thrilling and unsettling. Rose found herself overwhelmed with a mixture of emotions. It was only then that she decided she needed to find out for sure. She would bring it to Antiques Roadshow and see what professionals thought. The day of the Antiques Roadshow was a blur of excitement and nerves. Rose stood in line with dozens of others, each carrying their own treasures. The atmosphere was a strange blend of chaos and reverence. People were anxious, hopeful, and eager all at once. Some were bringing in vases or clocks they'd inherited, others were carrying large pieces of furniture. But for Rose, nothing felt quite as significant as the painting she clutched in her hands. It was as if everything from her grandmother's life had led her to this moment. The swirling thoughts in her mind of the house, of her grandmother's quiet strength, of the mysterious piece of art all merged into a single realization. This was more than just an appraisal. This was an exploration of legacy, family, and identity. When it was finally her turn, Rose approached the table where Meredith Hilferty, the appraiser, waited. Meredith was a poised, professional woman with decades of experience in the world of fine art and antiques. She welcomed Rose with a calm, reassuring smile. As Rose began to explain the history of the painting, how it had come from her grandmother, how it had always held an almost sacred place in their home, Meredith listened attentively, taking in every detail. "And do you know anything about the artist?" Meredith asked, her voice both warm and probing. Rose felt a flutter in her chest. She recounted what she had discovered on her own, the faint signature, the name Farney. Meredith's eyebrows rose slightly, a gesture that caught Rose's attention. "I'm familiar with the artist," Meredith said. Henry Farney was a French-born painter who spent much of his life in the United States, particularly in Pennsylvania. He's well known for his depictions of Native American culture and landscapes. His work is highly sought after by collectors today. Rose's heart raced. Could this be one of his originals? Meredith carefully studied the painting, running her hands gently along the frame, peering at the intricate brushstrokes, the rich layers of color, and the texture of the canvas. "I believe it is," she said after a long pause. "This painting is certainly a Farney. It's consistent with his style, and I can tell from the signature and the composition that it's likely an original work." Meredith took a few more minutes to inspect the piece. "You're very lucky," she said with a smile. "This is quite a valuable work. If this piece were to go to auction today, I would estimate its value to be between $200,000 and $300,000. Rose's head spun. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. That modest painting, the one that had been part of her family's home for as long as she could remember, was worth more than she could ever have imagined. It wasn't just a family treasure, it was a historical artifact, a priceless piece of art. "But why didn't my grandmother ever mention this?" Rose whispered. "She never spoke of its value, only that it was important." Meredith nodded thoughtfully. "It's possible that your grandmother simply didn't want to focus on the monetary aspect of the piece. Some families choose to keep the value of their treasures hidden, perhaps because they see them as more than just objects with price tags. The sentimental value often outweighs the financial one." Rose nodded, absorbing the weight of this new reality. The flood of emotions that swept over her was overwhelming. She thought about her grandmother, her quiet, humble ways, how she had never once let on that the painting was anything more than a cherished possession. Rose could almost hear her grandmother's voice in her mind. "This piece is a treasure, and one day you'll know its true value." Rose sat in stunned silence, her thoughts racing. She felt conflicted, proud, humbled, and uncertain all at once. The idea of selling the painting, despite its enormous value, didn't sit well with her. It felt like a betrayal of the memories it carried. But could she keep it? Could she afford to do so given the financial strain she was facing? The days that followed were filled with phone calls, meetings with her family, and discussions about what to do next. It was clear that the painting was not only an asset, it was also a symbol of everything Rose held dear. It was a legacy, something that transcended monetary value. But at the same time, Rose was faced with a harsh reality. What could she afford to do with such an extraordinary object? She didn't want to sell it, but was that the right decision? The pressure to make the right choice weighed heavily on her. She sought advice from trusted friends, colleagues, and even reached out to auction houses for their input. Some suggested she sell it, citing the financial freedom it could provide her. Others encouraged her to preserve it as a family heirloom, passing it down through generations. The weight of that decision seemed almost unbearable, but amidst the conflict, one thing remained certain: her grandmother's legacy, quiet, enduring, and now revealed, would live on. In all the discussions and deliberations, Rose often thought back to the tiny mosquito trapped between the glass and the canvas. She had removed it carefully, a small action that had set everything in motion. In hindsight, it seemed fitting what had begun as an insignificant insect had unwittingly led her to the greatest discovery of her life. The mosquito, once just an oddity, now seemed symbolic. Just as it had been preserved in time, so too had the painting, hidden away from the world's gaze, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. Perhaps it was fate, perhaps it was simply chance, but Rose couldn't help but feel that, in some strange way, that mosquito had been a sign. No matter what happened next, Rose knew she had uncovered something far greater than wealth. She had uncovered her family's history, a story of love, perseverance, and art that spanned generations. And that was the greatest treasure of all.